Alright, how's everybody doing? I'm going to actually show you the proper way to solder. I'm going to be soldering a Dean's plug onto one of these little Chinese plugs. So first, you have to tin the connectors on here. You can use a vise, you can use those little helping hand alligator clips. I'm actually using some real old school wire strippers. They're heavy and they don't move around. I just kind of stick it in there like that. Okay, so tinning means I'm just going to put some solder on these leads, and it makes it a lot easier to attach wires and not have a cold solder. So basically I just take a little bit of solder, touch it on here, and then I touch the soldering iron to it. Just like that. And it should have a nice shiny coating of solder on there. If you look at the Dean's plug, you'll notice that the bottom of the T is a little offset and it's not directly in the middle of the plug. So I do it on the side that it's furthest away, so when the wire goes on there it's not sticking off to the side. So again, just hold the solder on there and touch the soldering iron to it. Nice and shiny. Okay, next get the battery. I like to do the positive first, because putting it on the plug will be easier. Putting the black wire on the plug will be kind of awkward if you did that first, and you'll see what I'm kind of talking about. So I'm going to take my wire cutters and chop this off. Okay, get a little bit of heat shrink, stick it on the wire first, all the way to the bottom. Take your strippers and cut the wire so just a little bit is exposed. Don't be chopping off a whole bunch here. Kind of twist those together so it's not frayed. Go get your vise or whatever you were using before, stick it in there. Now this part is where I notice a lot of people are kind of screwing up. The proper way to do this is to put the soldering iron onto the wire for a little while near the top, let it heat up a little bit, and then you're going to get your solder and just kind of feed it into the wire, and eventually you'll notice the solder just kind of wicks itself into the wire, just like that. Remove the heat. The tip of that wire should be super shiny. Now, one thing I want to mention before I go any further is when you're tinning this wire and you're adding solder to it, you have to pay attention to make sure that the wire is actually sucking up the solder. It'll actually wick through all the little wires in there and become kind of one piece. I've seen some people just kind of put the solder on, and it does go onto the wire, but it doesn't actually seep into the wire, and that's bad. It needs to seep into the wire for it to get full coverage. And one of the last things I want to talk about is when you cut off your plug, make sure you cut it off evenly, because if one wire is longer than the other on your new thing, it's gonna curve, it's gonna bend, and you want it to be straight. So keep that in mind also. Okay, now both the plug and the wire are tinned. So now all you gotta really do is place the wire nice and straight on the plug while taking the soldering iron and placing it on top, and eventually the solder in the wire will melt with the tin on the plug. If you have a nice soldering iron, unlike mine, this process will be a little quicker. I'm using a 25 watt Weller, and it works fine. So I'm just making sure that these bond perfectly, and you can kind of tell because you can see where the wire meets the plug. There'll be like a kind of a little flow, I guess, of solder right in the corner where the wire and the plug meet. Now, you might want to be careful because this wire could get a little hot. You could use needle nose pliers, but it shouldn't take very long at all. So now these two are bonded, and that, it's kind of hard to see, but that is not coming anywhere. You can actually grab the wires and pull it, and this is not going to fall off. Right after that, you take your solder, your heat shrink you stuck on there, and you cover up what you did. Give it a little fire. You could use a heat gun for this. In fact, the heat gun would probably be a lot easier so you don't have that residue. But I don't have a heat gun, and that's it. That's the positive. I'll go ahead and do the black one real quick and show you what the final product looks like. Okay, so this is the final product. This battery was a Genze 1000 milliamp 3-cell. And these are actually the Hong Kong plugs. They're a copy of the Dean's connector, but they work just fine. But that's what it's supposed to look like. Nice and clean with the heat shrink. Nothing is exposed. There's no little wires poking out of the side or anything like that. And that's what it's supposed to look like. This is a professional solder job right here.